As you already know, ATC is an essential partner when you're flying IFR. While the constant chatter on the radio frequency may be at times distracting, it also means that ATC is just the push of a mic button away. And that can be quite comforting when all you can see outside the airplane are variations on a theme named gray. Let's suppose you're in the clouds on an IFR flight and doggone it, you can't get ATC to answer your calls and you don't hear anyone else talking either. Now, communication radios can only fail in one of three ways. You either cannot hear anyone, or you cannot call anyone, or both. That's it. So let's take a look at how you can figure out what the heck's going on. First, let's assume you've tried to call ATC and then other airplanes on the frequency, but no one answers. Before you decide you have a radio problem, you should look at the simple things first. Are you on the correct frequency? Maybe you misset it or accidentally changed it. Or maybe you missed a handoff to a new frequency and flew out of radio range for the frequency you're on. You can check your IFR chart to get another ATC frequency to try or an FSS frequency. If you're still not hearing anything, it's time to do some troubleshooting. Does the R for receive occasionally show in the display? If you do see the R, it could mean the radio is receiving something, but you just aren't hearing it. Make the squelch break by disabling the automatic squelch. You do that by pulling the Pull Test Off knob out. Then listen to see if you hear the background hiss. If you don't hear that hiss, then try checking the radio volume to be sure it's not turned down. If your headset has a volume control, you may also want to check to make sure you haven't turned its volume control down by accident. Now, in the new Skyhawk, as long as you're using a headset, you'll always be transmitting and receiving on the same radio. Just be sure the volume's turned up. But in older airplanes, it's very easy to misset your audio panel, so you're transmitting on one radio and listening on the other. And that makes it hard to hear the response. So check your audio panel settings. If you're still having a problem, you'll want to take a look at where your headset plugs into the instrument panel. Sometimes a connector will get pulled out without your noticing. You can also try selecting the cabin speaker. Maybe something happened to your headset. You might also try the EMG position of the audio panel mic selector switch. If the audio panel itself failed, this will bypass the audio amplifier and connect your microphone and headset directly to COM1. Then finally, if there are two radios installed, try the other one. One of the most common reasons you might not be able to hear the controller or other airplanes is because you have a stuck mic. Your microphone switch is stuck on. If this happens, your unintended transmission will shut down all other communications on the frequency. Plus, everyone will hear everything that is said in the airplane. You'll begin to recognize this situation when you realize you're not hearing anyone else on the frequency. In the new Skyhawk, you'll also see the T for transmit show continuously in the radio display. Now, if your microphone switch sticks in the transmit position, or if you forget to take your finger off the push-to-talk switch, the comm radio in your Skyhawk has a circuit that knows. If the mic is keyed for more than 33 seconds, the radio will stop transmitting and the comm frequency will start flashing at you. If that happens, make sure you're not accidentally holding the mic switch down. Then try unplugging the microphone cable of your headset from the jack and using the hand microphone. If that doesn't solve the problem, try the other radio. The next thing you'll want to look at is whether the radio is actually transmitting. In the new Skyhawk, you can test this by keying the microphone and looking for the T to light up between the comm frequency displays. In other airplanes, you can listen for the key click in your headset or cabin speaker. If you saw the T light up or heard the key click, but you're still not getting a response, your headset mic may have failed. So you can then try calling using the handheld cockpit mic. In another situation, you may hear the controller respond with aircraft calling. You have carrier only, no voice. This means the radio is transmitting a signal, but not the voice part of the signal. Usually this comes from the mic not making a good connection at the jack. Make sure your headset microphone is properly plugged in. If that doesn't fix the problem, try the handheld cockpit microphone, and then the other radio. Well, if all that didn't get your radio working, you can use your transponder to let ATC know you have a radio problem. Remember, all you have to do is put 7600 in the code window, and you will be telling air traffic control, my comm radios have failed. If your receiver is working, you may hear ATC say, Cessna 359 Echo Sierra. If you hear me, squawk ident. If the controller sees your transponder ident, he can then give you instructions and have you acknowledge them with an ident. If you don't respond to ATC's request for an ident, ATC will know that you've lost comm and they'll begin to clear the airspace around you. The key here is to make sure you actually have a complete communications failure before you move on to the next step. Now, when you're on an IFR flight plan, you could be in either VFR or IFR conditions. Suppose you're flying along in VFR conditions. FAA regulations say that if you lose your communications capability while you're in VFR conditions, or you fly into VFR conditions later on, you should remain in VFR conditions and land as soon as practicable. The question is, what does the FAA mean by practicable? Well, some might interpret that as land as soon as you can without bending up the airplane. But nobody expects you to land at an 1,800-foot crop duster strip in some remote corner of the planet. Land at the nearest suitable airport is a better way to express what the FAA wants you to do. By the way, suitable means an airport with a telephone. After you get on the ground, you'll need to call ATC right away and tell them you're down safely. Until ATC hears from you, they're still protecting the airspace for you by moving airplanes out of your way. The key here, though, is that once you're out of the clouds with no radios, stay out of the clouds if you possibly can. But what if you're in the clouds when you lose two-way radio communications? First of all, do you think this is an emergency? Well, you might, but as long as you and your airplane are still in good shape, the FAA doesn't consider it an emergency, even if you're in the clouds. Simply follow the lost comm rules and you should be home safe and sound in no time at all. So let's talk about what ATC expects of you if you lose your comm radios while you're in the clouds. The regulations tell you what to do about both your routing and altitude. Let's talk about the routing first. The FAA gives you 4 different choices of routing to fly in this priority. First, fly the routing ATC assigned you in your latest clearance. This could be the clearance you received when you were still on the ground, or a clearance revision that you received en route. Second, if you're being radar vectored by ATC when you lose comm, you should fly a direct route from the point of radio failure to the fixed route or airway that the controller specified when he started vectoring you. For example, the controller might have said Cessna 359 or Echo Sierra, turn right heading 360, radar vectors to Victor 4. If you lost comm while on a heading of 360 degrees, you would turn to intercept Victor 4. Then you'd follow the rest of your routing to your destination. Third, if ATC hasn't cleared you all the way to your destination, say only as far as some specified fix, fly the route they told you to expect beyond that fixed. Although it's really rare to get a clearance to a fix short of your destination, if you do get one, it might sound like this. Cessna 359er Echo Sierra cleared direct Emporia Vortec. Expect the Jayhawk 3 arrival into Kansas City. And that expected route is what you'd fly in the event of lost comm. Finally, if you reach a point where you don't have a route assigned or a route you were told to expect in a further clearance, then fly the route you filed in your IFR flight plan. Now, let's talk about the altitude you should fly. The trick here is to fly at the highest of the following 3 altitude choices. The altitude that was assigned to you in your last clearance, the minimum IFR altitude for your location, or the altitude ATC has told you to expect in a future clearance. For example, ATC may tell you, climb and maintain 4,000 feet. Expect 5,000 feet in 10 minutes. In a lost comm situation, after 10 minutes had elapsed, you'd leave 4,000 feet and climb to 5,000 feet. Now, here's a scenario that pops up all the time in hangar flying what-if sessions. You're flying along at your assigned altitude of, say, 7,000 feet, and the MEA pops up to 9,000 feet after a certain fix. Well, that's an easy answer. When you get to the point where the MEA changes, start your climb to 9,000. There are rocks somewhere below that, and your Skyhawk just hates rocks. Of course, if the fix had a minimum crossing altitude or MCA flag, you'd start your climb before you reach the fix so as to cross it at or above the MCA. But what if later on the MEA drops down to 5,000? What then? Well, that too is an easy answer. You go back down to 7,000, your last assigned altitude, because 7,000 feet is now the highest of the altitude choices. Now, what if you're still in the clouds when you reach your destination and you need to shoot an instrument approach? Well, first of all, you can shoot any approach you want. ATC will have moved everyone out of the way for you. Second, you start the approach by leaving the initial approach fix at your estimated time of arrival. And you calculate your ETA by starting with your actual takeoff time and then adding the estimated time en route that you filed in your flight plan. If you arrive at your initial approach fix before your estimated time of arrival, you should enter holding, maintain your altitude, and wait for your ETA. If there's no holding pattern shown at the initial approach fix, just make a direct entry to a standard right-hand holding pattern on the course that brought you to the fix. If you arrive over the IAF after your estimated time of arrival, just keep on trucking and start the approach. They'll be expecting you. Now suppose that before you lost communications, the controller had told you to hold at a fix while he fit you into the traffic flow for the approach. As you know, when a controller gives you holding instructions, he should also give you an expect further clearance time. That's your escape hatch if you lose communications while in the holding pattern. If you then did lose communications, you would leave the holding fix at your expect further clearance time. If ATC has a way of getting instructions to you, you're still communicating, even though it might not be in the normal way. If you pack a handheld transceiver along and you're able to use it to talk with ATC, obviously you're still communicating. Unfortunately, most handhelds can receive from a far greater distance than they can transmit. If you have a system to hook your handheld up to an exterior antenna, that can make a big difference. But you may still find yourself in the position of just hearing ATC's instructions without being able to acknowledge them. An uncommon solution to a lost comm situation is your trusty cell phone. And you thought it was only good for annoying other drivers on the freeway. Now, I know you're not supposed to use a cell phone when airborne, but I think the folks at the FCC would forgive your transgression if it's a safety of flight issue. In the back of the airport facility directory, you'll find phone numbers for the flight service stations as well as the air route traffic control centers. Remember, as a pilot in command, you can use all available resources when you have a problem in the air. Now, although losing communications while in the clouds is very unlikely, and even if it happens, the FAA doesn't consider it to be an emergency, the prospect still unnerves most instrument pilots. But by knowing what's expected of you and by using all the many resources available to you, you'll be able to handle the situation gracefully. Then, in one of those hangar flying sessions, you can regale your fellow birdmen with a tale of daring do, how you saved the day in the clouds when all your radios headed south.